I've always thought of the planet as a gift.
Welcome to Nature Magic. Over the last few months, we have spoken to nature lovers around Ireland and even in the UK and the US, thanks to Zoom. But today it's wonderful to be talking to another local naturalist and a great supporter of Burren Nature Sanctuary, Gordon Darcy. Gordon is a civil engineer, but has spent most of his working life as a freelance environmental author, artist, and educator. He has had 17 exhibitions featuring his nature artwork, has contributed to many magazines, and has published 9 books. The Birds at Lough Beg, The Guide to the Birds of Ireland, The Pocket Guide to the Birds of Ireland, The Pocket Guide to the Animals of Ireland, The Natural History of the Burren, Ireland's Lost Birds, The Burren Wall, Narture, a nature art manual for primary schools, and most recently, through Collins Press, The Breathing Burren, which has been so successful it is currently going to reprint. He has also taught many educational programs and designed concepts for visitor centres and nature display boards in 20 venues in Ireland. Gordon is also just a lovely, friendly person, a great nature lover, and we're so glad to have him on the podcast today. Welcome, Gordon Darcy. Hi, Gordon. It's lovely to have you on the podcast today. Gordon is a local naturalist. And do you want to tell everybody where you are at the moment?
Yes, indeed. I'm in Killinarran, a small village on the edge of Galway Bay, not far from Kinvara. I'm sitting in the front room looking out at a wonderful piece of greenery that we've planted in front of us. It's a little bit overcast, but nice to be here talking to you on a day like this.
Thank you so much. It's great to be talking to you as well. And Gordon is also an author, and we'll talk about his books and everything, and I'll have links in the show notes, and they're all to do with nature, and he's a fantastic artist as well. So do you want to tell us, how did you become a nature lover?
Yeah, that's question number one, I think, in most questionnaires. But I tell you what, it's kind of vague now. I've always had this sort of interest in nature from a very young age. I was always curious about it, particularly about birds. And I figure the initial kind of trigger was at primary school when the teacher started talking about birds of prey and how their bones were hollow, and that if they missed their prey, they could get badly injured. And it sort of stimulated my imagination. And I looked at birds differently from then on, I think. But I also liked the way birds flew and how elusive they were, and how beautiful they were, of course. And I suppose I was always slightly, if you like, removed from society to the extent that I always had this artistic eye and liked to draw from an early age. And nature was the obvious subject because I was so close to it all the time. So those are some of the ideas, but it's vague now because it's so long ago. You know the way memory plays tricks on you as well. You're not too sure what you've remembered and how much you've colored it down the years. But I imagine that those were certainly instigatory factors.
And do you remember drawing your first animal, or do you remember any early drawings?
I do. I remember my earliest drawings. My father used to bring envelopes home from work, and I would draw, not necessarily animals and birds, but anything. I would draw airplanes, and I remember drawing scenes which would be sort of verboten nowadays, of Indians going around a fort with soldiers in the fort shooting out at them, and the Indians falling off their horses. In those days you were captivated by television and programs that were popular. But as I say, that's certainly not PC anymore to think along those lines. But those are the kind of ideas. I suppose then movement and form of any kind appealed to me. And because, as I say, I had this artistic bent, I just drew anything.
So just all your imagination and everything, it came out on paper. Yeah, that's wonderful. And do you have a favorite plant or animal?
No, I tell you, people ask me this all the time. Do you have favorites? I don't look at nature in that way. I don't have a kind of how would you describe it? A sort of a favorite type vision. I look at nature in its totality, in its complexity, and how one species links with another. in the overall ecology of things. So I tend to see everything as having its own beauty and its own place. I remember as a kid not liking spiders, being in fact quite frightened of them. But over time, I got used to spiders and started to see them in a different light. Nowadays, I see them as very beautiful, interesting creatures with their own kind of dynamic and their own way of doing things. And I think that that's what has happened with my overall view of nature. Instead of having favorites and singling out species which have, was widespread appeal because of aesthetic reasons, I tend to see that everything having its own beauty. Does that answer the question for you?
It does. That's lovely. And yeah, I used to be afraid of spiders too. And we had a really lovely lady, Laura Powers, on the podcast. And she said that spiders are a symbol of creativity, especially writing. So that might be why they're coming up, for you now that you love them. So, do you feel spiritually connected to nature, or have you had any instances in your life that have felt like a particular spiritual experience?
Plenty.
Yeah.
I often find nature kind of having an overarching spiritual dimension to it. I've always thought of the planet as a gift. I think in terms of
that's lovely.
And the thing about gifts is that if you have the right attitude towards a gift, you want to share it. And that's where I see my role, in fact, as a sort of a sharer of the gift of nature. If you think of a box of chocolates, a big box of chocolates, and with all the different varieties of sweets that there are in there, and if someone sticks their hands in and goes for all the pralines and eliminates them, they're effectively exploiting and plundering something that's meant to be shared. And I feel as though there are parallels there with the gift of the planet. The planet is something that we should be looking at in terms of moderation and fairness and sharing and non-exploitation. Unfortunately, we haven't, as humanity, we haven't done that down the centuries, but I think we're getting better at it now. But I do think that the spiritual aspect of it is always there, and I've always felt that from a very early age, that we didn't make nature. Nature is, we're part of it, of course, but it's beyond us in terms of how it came to being, and we need to have some sort of, I think, divine connection there, or at least see it in that sense, rather than simply as something to be mined or exploited.
Well, that's a lovely, lovely message, that the planet is a gift.
Yeah, I see it that way.
Yeah, that really is. And what positive actions, that was the next question, what do you think people can do really to support nature now? They obviously feel overwhelmed with the whole crisis. But if we can encourage people to do simple, easy things, what would you suggest?
Well, as I mentioned to you, as I wrote to you, in fact, in your little preliminary connection there, or a link, I think planting trees is one of the best things you can do. Mm-hmm. I think people should, on a local basis, plant as many trees as they can, native trees particularly. But I think to carry that to its logical conclusion, I think if you're looking at it on a planetary basis, every country should try and plant trees. And there are wonderful things going on in that respect in parts of the world. This green belt that they're building across the Sahel, for instance, from West Africa to East Africa, is a big sort of international kind of effort there, where all sorts of countries along that route are combining together to do something about climate change and preventing the spread of the Sahara southwards and sequestering carbon dioxide and everything else that goes with tree planting. So, that would be a priority in my mindset, in my mind's eye.
Yeah, that's great. That is a lovely, heartwarming project. It really is. And we were contacted by an interior design company who are going to partner up with us to plant some more trees here at the Burren Nature Sanctuary. So they're called Dan Air. So every customer they get, they'll give them to native trees as well, which is lovely. Every little bit helps. What have you noticed the ash dieback?
It's quite widespread, and I'm very concerned about it. Both in my own garden, where we've got evidence of it here, but also along the hedgerows. And I know that, having looked at the map, there are some parts of the country seriously afflicted by it already. In County Wicklow, for instance, they have a lot of it. So yeah. I don't know.
I don't know either. I was actually shocked driving through the Burren the other day to see so much of it. So we can only hope.
In the Burren?
Yes, across the Burren. And we do have it here as well. We can only hope some of the trees will be strong enough to survive.
Well, these things come in phases as well, Mary. You know, the Dutch elm disease, for instance, had its extreme phase 20 years ago when it wiped out millions of elm trees. And then it faded, and that tends to be what happens. So I imagine this ash dieback will do the same. I think it'll reach a peak, kill off a lot of young trees. I think that's where it heads for first, and then gradually destroy itself. It sort of implodes, and the new generation of ash that come along will survive and thrive.
Yeah, so we're trying not to get too upset about it, but we're planting some oak and some hazel and some different trees that to take over for a while anyway.
But that's a good plan.
Yes, exactly. So I was going to ask about your inspiring nature books that you might want to recommend, but would you like to tell us about some of the books you've written first and what you're working on at the moment? And we'll go to the recommendations after that.
Yeah, theme is nature and the environment, as you know, and I've looked at it from a lot of different ways, mostly through birds, because I think birds are a great way into the whole natural world, and I've always been stimulated by birds. So I've written three or four books on birds, a book on animals as well, 3 books on the Burren. One, the natural history, one, the Breathing Burren, which is my latest one, and stone wall book looking at the stone walls. Yeah, it's a slim little volume created by Girolis. They published it, and I wrote it along with Anne Corf, who did some of the illustrations. I looked at the stone walls from 3 different points of view, in response to a lot of questions I had from my students in the Burren College of Art. I teach Irish studies there, so they were interested in why people would build stone walls across such barren landscape. I thought I'd investigate this. I addressed it in 3 different ways: aesthetically, historically, and in terms of the wildlife corridors that these stone walls provide. Mm-hmm. So those are the sort of themes, if you like, that I focused on. I got a bit of criticism from people who are stone wall builders and reckon that I didn't know anything about building stone walls. In fact, I've actually built a stone wall myself, but I didn't look at it from the point of view of, making a boundary out of dry stone walling. I was interested in looking at it from those points of view. And I think I succeeded well. I was very happy with it in the end. As I say, the illustrations were partly done by Anne Corf and partly done by myself.
Lovely. And the Breathing Burren book has been very successful. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that one?
Well, that's a series of essays. I think there's over 60 essays in it, again, which I illustrated myself in watercolour. And they cover my experience of 30 years living and working in the Burren. And I've looked at, I suppose, the natural history primarily, but also at my relationship with the local people who live there, the farmers and the people whom I've interacted with down the years. So that was a labour of love for me. And I'm delighted to get it out when we did. And we sold out all the copies, so that was great. I'm just waiting. I'm waiting for them to reprint it.
Wonderful. So it will be available on your website again, will it?
Well, I hope so. So.
So we'll put the links in the show notes to that. And are there any other authors you'd like to recommend to people? Because we're getting a lovely book list along with the podcast.
Well, there's a very good book by Padraig Fogarty called Whittled Away. Have you read that one?
Yes, and Porrick was on the podcast as well, so he's brilliant.
Well, one of the books I dip into a lot is a book I've had for many years. It was written by the professor of zoology at NUIG, a man called James Fairley, and it's called An Irish Beast Book.
Oh.
Now, what's nice about that book, it's kind of full of solid scientific information, but it's also historical. He's delved into the history of these species, and I find that it's a very interesting read. I go back to it again and again.
Oh, fascinating. Great. We'll put that down as well.
An Irish Beast Book.
An Irish Beast Book. Brilliant. So if you had a magic wand, what one thing would you do for the planet today? Oh, you can do a couple of things if you want.
Well, on the positive side, I'd plant trees, and I'd get as many people as I could influence to plant trees as well, because of the fantastic things that trees do and because of their basic beauty and how they provide habitats for so many creatures. That's one thing I do on a positive side. On the negative side, if you like, I would get people to be much more conscious of what they throw into the sea, particularly plastic. I would like to see something being done about, winning people over at large to stop doing stuff like that, and to think respectfully, shall we say, of the sea and its vulnerabilities.
Yeah, no, that's the lovely wish as well. I mean, I just wish that the plastic would suddenly get a value like oil or something, and everyone would manically start picking it all up and looking for it and gathering it all up.
Wouldn't that be great?
Yeah, that would be wonderful. So thank you so much, Gordon, for being on the podcast, and
I'm delighted.
Hopefully see you soon. And we look forward. You're writing some new books as well. Do you want to tell us briefly about what you've been doing over the lockdown?
Yeah, well, there's stories more than books. I've written 5 stories for children of different ages, and I've been very lucky in that just across the road from me are 3 little girls who live in the house across the way, and I've sent the stories across to them, and they've vetted them for me, and thankfully I got pretty high marks.
So I don't know how much focus group. You have a focus group.
That's right. So yeah, I'm hoping to get those published sometime, but you never know. It's tricky enough nowadays with all the competition in writing, which you're very aware of yourself, I'm sure.
Yes. So, do they have a title? Have you chosen a title?
Yes, yeah. The last one I've written is called Laura and the Leveret, which is
lovely.
A little girl who finds a baby hare, and the story behind it. The other one was, let me see if I can go back through them again. Connor, the corncrake who couldn't crack.
Lovely.
The story behind why it couldn't crack. And then there's Jenny the Jealous Jay.
Jenny the what?
The Jealous Jay.
Oh, the Jealous Jay. Oh, Hannah the Heron.
And Rory the Roaming Wren.
Oh, Rory the Wren. How lovely. Thank you, Gordon, and we hope to see you in the Burren Nature Sanctuary very soon. Thank you all for listening to Nature Magic. Please subscribe to the podcast to help our reach, and we would love it if you could also give us an honest review. We have wonderful news that the Burren Nature Sanctuary book, Nature Magic, How You Can Engage Everyone with Biodiversity, that launched on Kindle last week, became a bestseller on Amazon.co.uk and .com overnight. Thank you so much for everyone that bought the ebook. The print version of Nature Magic is due out on September the 1st. Burren Nature Sanctuary is open Wednesdays to Sundays, 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. No pre-booking necessary. We have had great feedback from customers who are finding the one-way route and the new COVID restrictions easy to navigate and seem to be delighted to have the opportunity to have a day out. Also, Amelia is nearly booked out for the Fairy Pig Walks on Airbnb experiences, so thank you, Amelia. Over the summer, the podcast will air every 2 weeks. Thank you for listening.